Hello, welcome to my introduction to Copperplate Calligraphy part number 6 of this short video series. Today I'm going to be talking about the group of the A's, which is what we call in Italic calligraphy. This is not Italic, it's Copperplate, but we are going to be looking at the group of the A's. So first of all, let's start for the foundation. I'm using a guideline in here, and if you need to download this guideline, you can find it by following the link on my Instagram bio, and you will access a PDF file that contains a collection of different blank sheets from different calligraphic styles. I'm going to be marking the area of the page that I'm going to be working on today. So I'm going to be using mostly the X height, and the ratio that I'm using for these short videos is 2:1:2, which it means that we have 2 units for the ascenders, and we have also 2 units for the descenders. And that's where I'm mostly going to be working. Okay, I'm going to be talking about a few things today. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is ductus, and I'll explain what the ductus means, which is basically the order of the strokes to create a letter form. And the second, it's gonna be the group of the A's. And then thirdly, I'm going to write a few words and talking about the shapes and talking about the ductus. Okay, so both of these things. So let's start very slowly. And I'm going to go back and talk about the oval shape that I have mentioned in, I think, part 2 or part 3 of this series. I'm gonna go closer now. Cool. All right, so I'm going to repeat what I mentioned in the past regarding oval shapes, and then we'll start with letter A. I'm going to use 2 units to show you in a bigger area. So ductus. So a lot of calligraphers, when they create oval shapes, they will start at the top. I mentioned, I think in part number 2, that the way how I look at oval shapes and analyze this movement is the same way as I analyze and look at a clock. So this oval for me could look like a clock, and that means that in here we would have 12, 3, 6, and 9. And I use this analogy because it helps me to understand what ductus I'm using to write different words, different letters. So a lot of calligraphers start writing ovals at 12 o'clock. And so that means that when I'm creating letter O, I start from the very top and I will go down. And as you know, going down means thicker stroke and going up means thinner strokes. So that's my initial point. If I follow the ductus of 12 o'clock to create letter A, I need 2 movements. So the first one is exactly the same as my letter O because it's based on the same shape. Number 1 is here. And then number 2 starts at the top, goes down, touching the side of the oval and creating an exit. Okay, and that will be number 2. That's one option. And a lot of calligraphers will use this option. Obviously, what you want to accomplish, which is not happening at the moment, but it should happen, is that the oval of letter O is the same as the oval of letter A. So you need to be watching out this all the time because this is going to happen many times, okay? We do it by hand. We are humans. We are not computers. So that is the challenges we need to be facing And that is basically the difference between calligraphy and typography. So typography will always be exactly the same shape, but in this case, we are doing it by hand. So we have to be looking and comparing what's going on in here. Okay, that's one way to create letter A is by creating two strokes. We'll see later on that we can do a few tricks to make sure that we don't have a spacing here between the oval and the downstroke. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna call this ductus 1 in here. So ductus number 2. And I'm sure there are more. I'm just going to be touching on 2 types of ductus for today. So the way how I start my oval shapes I start at what I would call at 2 o'clock. So as you can see here, I'm not gonna be starting at the top anymore. I'm gonna start at more or less 2 o'clock. So that's my baseline and top of the X height. And then instead of going all the way up here, I'm going all the way more or less at 2 o'clock. And I'm going to be up, down, up again, and closing this oval shape. And for letter A, I will start exactly in the same place. I'm going up, down, going up, closing my oval shape. And now from here, down a stroke and underturn to finish the letter. So I started again in the same area, and I only needed one single movement to create the letter. It's very similar to what we would do with cursive handwriting. So cursive, basically, most of the letters written in cursive are made out of one single movement. And the reason is because we want to increase the speed when writing. So my A starts same as my O's at 2 o'clock and is done with one single movement. Now, if I do that with my nib, all right, so I'm gonna move maybe down here. And I'll do it the same using 2 units just to compare. I can be starting at the top at 12 o'clock and slightly applying pressure, releasing pressure, and closing my oval. Letter O. I'll repeat the same for A. 12 o'clock, applying pressure and releasing pressure, closing my oval shape at the very top, and I will try as much as I can to create an invisible joint at the top, which for me is challenging because I don't use this way of writing normally. So to create an invisible joint, I need to be very careful. Now, what do I do to make sure that the top of my A is gonna be flat? What I would do if I'm using these ductus is I'm going to the tangent side of this oval and I'm going up thin, 1 millimeter to the right, push, and underturn to finish this A. I ran out of ink, of course, so I'm going to be filling in the railway just to show you what I just did. Okay, so I have number 1, and in here, number 2 movements. Now, if I'm doing the O's with different ductus, I'm gonna start at 2 o'clock more or less, and I'm going up thin and around, thin, press, release, closing the oval shape at 2 o'clock. Now in here, if my joint is not invisible, I'm not that worried because I'm going to be adding this small eyelet and opening up my arm to be holding hands with the next letter form. Okay, so I'm not so worried about that. Now, what I'm not happy about this is that the shape of this oval is really different to this one. And I actually I am happy with that one. So that needs to be redone again. So let's try again. I start at 2 o'clock and I go up thin around the corner, apply pressure, release pressure, going back up, closing my oval shape, adding the loop or eyelet inside and making leaving the contour of the letter O clean and opening up my arm to be holding hands to the next letter form. The exit of letter O should be on the same slant as the rest of the writing, which is 55 degrees. All right, following these ductus, I will create letter A in one continuous movement. So I'm starting at 2 o'clock, going up and around, apply pressure, release pressure, going back up, closing the oval shape, 1 millimeter to the right, press, release, underturn, exit. And the whole word, the whole letter form has been done with one single movement. Okay, so you can choose between option 1, option 2. I'm going to do a few examples using the different type of ductus, but for the moment, let's keep going with the group of the A's. So in Italic calligraphy, the group of the A's will be talking about the A's are very different because in here for copperplate, we have an oval shape, but for Italic, we have something that looks more like a triangle. So if we are looking at Italic, it's something a lot more similar to a triangle than an oval shape. So in Italic, we will have something that looks like that. Letter A, letter G, letter Q, letter D. All right, so we will be looking at that. Now, in this case, we will be looking at a shape that is a lot more similar to a triangle than an oval. But you see the correlation between shapes because we have the same areas for all these letter forms. So for copperplate, we are going to be looking at the same thing. So the same relationship that we have with letter A is the same that we are going to have now when we create the other letter forms. I'm going to go a little bit closer now and write actually using the guideline. So let's go a little bit closer. All right. A few things. Okay, I'm going to be using this area in here. And let's mark the units. So that is my X height. And for the moment, I'm going to be sitting here. And the next letter form I'm going to do is a letter D. And it's going to be using the short ascender line. All right. So this time I'm going to be writing smaller. I'll repeat the A and then we go into the D. All right, so as I mentioned before, you can use different types of ductus. I'm going to use the 2 o'clock one. So I'm starting at 2 o'clock and I'm going up and around, push and release, and straight down, exit. I'm going to repeat the same movement. Now I'm going to go a little bit taller. So what I'm doing now is I'm repeating the same as I did with letter A, starting at 2 o'clock, and I'm going up and around, down. This time I keep going all the way up to the first short ascender line. I go 1 millimeter to the right, and I press and try to keep the same consistency of pressure across the entire underturn. and exit. You can see in here, in both of these letter forms, here is a little bit longer than I want to keep going with the underturn and make this exit stroke at least as long as the middle of the X height. So it's the same reference point I have mentioned in the other videos, especially on video part number 1. Now, more shapes following the A shape. So following the same A shape, I'm going to create letter G. So with letter G, I'm going to start in the same position. So I'm starting at 2 o'clock, going up, thin, around the corner, push, going up, close the oval, 1 millimeter to the right, and now push down as if I'm doing letter J. Release, around, crossing the baseline, and exit. When I exit this letter form, I need to keep in mind the spacing between one letter and the next letter form. All right. So when I create the exit, unless it's the last letter of your word, like any INGs that are very common in English, playing, running, talking. If the G is the last letter of your word, you don't have to be so mindful. But if you're writing something where the G is in the middle of your word, the moment you cross the baseline and keep going up, you already need to start envisioning what's the space inside my oval and what's the space between my G and the next letter form, so that the spacing is as important as the shapes. Okay. Now, let's do letter Q. Like the shapes I use for letter Q are very different to what you might find on some manuals, just because I find that letter Q in many manuals look very similar to letter G. I will do it now anyway to show you, and then I'll explain how I write letter Q. So many manuals will have a letter Q that looks like a letter A, starting with up, close the oval, flat, and pressure, release pressure after the short descender line, and touch the stem on the baseline of the X height, and from here exit the stroke. And again, be mindful of the spacing that you are creating. For example, if you are writing quit, which we will do. This is the shape you are going to find in a lot of manuals. Sometimes the Q is a little bit shorter. Sometimes it's as long as letter G. For my point of view, I just find this letter form too close to letter G. So I normally don't use this shape. So here are a couple of shapes that we can also use. Q number 2. Starting in the same area, up and down, going up again, flat top, 1 millimeter to the right, and then in here, I'm going to start releasing pressure and goes back to thin. And in here, if I want to, I can extend and create a little bit of a ligature like that. It's not a ligature, it's just a swoosh, it's just a finished. Depending what you are writing, this can work. If you have another descender really close by, like another G very close, this shape might not work for you. If we are writing quit, another good alternative for this Q is actually this one. So up and down, up again, close the oval, make sure it's closed, and then 1 millimeter to the right, and then I'm going down. Option number 3, you can create the same thickness across the entire Q. And then I will use the beginning of the next letter form to actually cross the stem. So in this case, if I'm writing quit, I'm going to start up here cross the stem, go up, and then create letter U. Well, it's not gonna happen because I just ran out of ink again. All right. And the rest, I'll do it again. Now, things I want to improve straight away, looking at this letter form, is I can see the spacing here between the Q and the U is greater than the space inside my oval shape. So that's the first thing I want to improve in here. So watch out. The second thing is like, I can use this Q with the entire stem with the same thickness, or I can use this Q, but reducing the thickness, going up, going down, going up again, flat, and now going back to thin, okay? So in here, you can see that I reduced the thickness and I went back to a very thin bottom. Is the same shape as in here. Now, I will repeat again the starting point of letter U. So I'm going to cross the stem and use this as a ligature to start letter U. And crossbar and tittle or the dot of the eye. Now, things I want to look at in here, as I mentioned, is a space inside and a space in between should be as similar as possible so that I'm creating a pattern between all my black and whites. The second thing I have mentioned in other videos is that I want to be looking at the negative space I'm creating, these triangle shapes on each letter form. And I ensure these triangles are very similar between each other by looking at the meeting point between the thin and the thicks happening in the middle of the X height. And also here is my negative space at the top of the Q. All right. Now in here, I still see that this space is greater. So I need to keep improving. Okay. That space. Now, let's do another alternative for letter Q, which is what I normally use for mine. When I was a child at school, I learned my letter Q using this shape. I thought everyone wrote letter Q in the same way, but when I arrived in Australia and I started teaching calligraphy, I realized that actually most of the people don't write letter Q like that. Then I have been asking the same question for now 7 years, and I have come to the realization that a lot of the people that come from Spanish-speaking countries, like Spain and a lot of countries in South America, have learned the Q using this shape. And this is my personal theory, is that this might have been influenced by the Catholic Church, because it's like bringing their branding across the alphabet, which is not the first time this has happened. But as I mentioned, this is only my personal theory, so don't take it seriously. I just find out that there is a lot of Spanish-speaking countries that were taught the same way as me. Now, this is sort of like an extension of that. I'm personally not religious, so I don't follow any school, but for copperplate, the shape that I'm using is actually a fancy iteration of this shape. So I'll do it with a ballpoint pen first. I'm starting at 2 o'clock and going up and down. And now what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to turn towards the right-hand side. I'm going to cross the stem in the center. I'm going to create a tiny little loop shape, and I'm going back up and following, and now holding hands to the next letter form. So it's also a cursive way to create the letter form, because I create the entire shape in one continuous movement, and actually the entire word in one continuous movement. But this is what I'm going to create. And if you see, it's basically the fancy iteration of this shape. You can use any of the ones we have done before. Let's go. Okay, following the shape. Again, I'm starting at 2 o'clock and I'm going up and around, push, release, up, flat top, and keep pushing down, releasing and turning towards the right. I cross the stem, tiny loop of fish shape, and going back again, and beginning of my letter U. All the time looking at the slant of 55 degrees and trying to follow it as closely as possible. Okay, things to improve in here. Don't retouch, because it doesn't work a lot of the times. So that's a mental note for myself, because I don't normally retouch. So when I do, it's very visible. I'm very happy at the moment with the space inside the ovals and the space inside and between each other letter form. So in here, yes, I make sure about a few things in here. This small loop, I call this shape fish shape for obvious reasons. When I do this shape, I make sure about a few things. I might need to do this bigger, or I might need to go now closer again. So, all right. Sorry, it might be pixelated. I just want to have a look at this for a second. I make sure that I see a triangle shape in this area. Did you see where I just filled in? I have to see a blank space in that area, so that I don't want to have blobs of ink. I want to cross, have a fish shape and cross again, and I want to see a blank area in there. I will do it again. Also, you can fill in this fish shape with ink if you want to get extra fanciness. Let's go back out and I will repeat it again. So I'm in here. I'm gonna do it bigger so you can see it better. So this time I'm gonna be using 2 units instead of 1, just to show you. 2 o'clock, up and down, back up thin, close the oval, close the stem, tiny fish or loop, going back in and holding hands to the next letter form. All right, this is the same thing, but really, really large. If you see what's going on in here is number 1, this small loop, it's not sitting on the horizontal, is on an angle. It's very much a perpendicular to the 55-degree slant, okay? Number 2, if you wanna make things very fancy pants, I will come here and you can also fill in the small loop shape. Number 3, mental note for myself, avoid to have this small loop so close to the baseline, okay? You see the bottom of the queue and the loop. For my personal taste, I would not do that so close to the baseline. So this space is too small. Number 4, if you start your ovals and A shapes at 2 o'clock, make sure that the spacing here is completely close. All right, so there is no light coming inside. So these are all things that I'm telling myself to improve next time I do it. So let's do it again, and then I'll move on into, I want to look at a letter P that is round shape as an alternative as well. Okay, I'll do it bigger again. So 2 o'clock, going up and down, press, release, going up, close the oval. Next mental note, get more ink before you go down a stroke. Exit. All right, so things have improved. I have a lot, the gap in here is much greater. So it's better. I can feel it or don't feel the small loop, and I have to see this small triangle between the stem to make sure that there is no blobs of ink in here. So the main mistake I see all the time is that this loop is on the top, on the stem. And I would say this loop is not on the top of the stem, is actually on the left hand side of the stem. Okay, to finish, I want to look at letter P and do a variation, which is a round shape. So I'm going back smaller again. And let's look at the P that I explained, I think, on part 1 or 2. I don't remember now. So let's go baseline and a little bit taller. So this P is an alternative, which is a little bit taller than the rest of the letter forms. So where is it on the guideline sitting? This P is using the short descender line and only halfway inside the short ascender line. So this is the position of this first stem. Now, I position the pen on the baseline, but you can position the pen if you want in the middle of the X high. It's up to you, whatever it feels easier. And then from here, I'm going to do a double turn. So I'm going up, round, push, following the 55-degree slant and exit. That's the P you're gonna find in a lot of manuals. Now there is a P that looks a lot more casual and very common in brush lettering, which is round P. So this letter P looks like I'm going up and down. And if I'm writing cursive, I will do everything in one movement. And then I have an oval shape and I close the oval in here. So as you can see, basically it's the same shape as our oval, but this time the oval starts clockwise. So the direction of the oval is clockwise. But what happens inside is the same as what happens inside my A's and my O's. So let's do that with the nib. So I'm going up very thin. Up, flat top, and down a stroke. Stop. I'm going back to the baseline and going up as if I'm doing a letter N. And now apply pressure, release pressure, close the oval shape. Now, as you can see, obviously, if I turn this P 180 degrees, you're going to see something very similar to a letter D. So it's going to be very much related to the same shapes. All right. So now we are going to be looking at a letter. Oopsie. Okay, sorry. I hope you didn't get seasick. Cool. Last one for this group of DAs. So the last letter form is letter D. Where am I sitting on the guideline? So letter D, I already did it before. So now we are going to do an example writing a word. So can we write something with a letter D? Let's write dalmata to finish. So let's do it with a nib. And let's see how we are going to join these oval shapes. Okay, so starting at 2 o'clock, going up, down, up, all the way till the short ascender line, 1 millimeter to the right, and press. Thin, underturn, stop. Every time I have an oval coming next, because I'm using this type of ductus, that is ductus number 2, I called. I stop the exit of this letter in the middle of the X height, allocate the space for my letter A, and start at 2 o'clock. So I stop in there. How much space do I need to allocate? I know the space because I know that it needs to be as wide as my letter D. So optically, I need to be envisioning the space I need to, and then 2 o'clock, up and down. Holding hands, going up, closing the A, and now down. I haven't explained any long ascenders yet, so I will do that in another video. Stop. Again, I need to do the same because I just explained that every time I have an oval shape, I stop in the middle of the X height. I need to allocate a space for my oval. And I know that my oval needs to be very similar to the 2 ovals I already have on this word. And at 2 o'clock, I'm going up and around, thin, push, holding hands, up, flat top, and all the way up till the short ascender line. And I stop in here because I'm running out of ink, so I don't want to make the same mistake again. Now I'm going to the top of the T, 1 millimeter to the right, and push. Up and stop again. All right, so the same rhythm of movements. Allocate the space for the third A, 2 o'clock, down, holding hands, up, top, down, exit. Exit at 55 degrees and long and curvy crossbar or straight, whatever you prefer. I always tend to do these crossbars really long because I find copperplate is a type of script based on showing off. So I don't go shy with crossbars, all of the opposite. So that would be the rhythm to create this word and the ductus. Obviously, if you are using the first ductus that I explained, that that needs 2 movements for letter A, you will be moving very differently. Okay, so in here, in this section, I will do it with the nib, maybe it's a lot easier. I will be moving with TA in this order. I will go up, exit. From here, I will push, close my A, and from the tangent on the right-hand side, up, flat top, down, and I will create my letter A. Okay, that's the difference between one movement and the other. For me, this letter A looks weird because I'm not used to moving in this direction. So yeah, my hand is not fit enough to create good ovals in that ductus, but it's completely correct and it's up to you how you want to create the letter form. So remember, ductus means order of strokes. Okay, so I hope this was helpful. I'm going back out so you can see what we had a look at today. And lastly, I want to mention very, very quickly that if you are using Nikko G or Zebra Gs, and you want to try a few different nibs, because, you know, Copperplate has like many, you know, like many that you can choose. I'm gonna add on the comments a list of 5 other nibs, well, 4 other nibs that I recommend to start giving it a try if you want to test out what other nibs can bring into your writing. All right. Nikko G and Zebra G, I think, are very good nibs to start with if you're a total beginner. But if you have been doing Copperplate for a while, you might want to start trying out a few different nibs. The ones I recommend are Leonard Principle, Extra Fine, The Hand 101, Gillot 303, and Gillot 404. Also, something interesting to give it a try as well would be like testing what happens if you are writing with a straight nib and how do you feel. All right, because a lot of the times we say that, yes, if you are a right-hander, you should be using the oblique holder. And if you're a left-hander, the straight holder. But there are many calligraphers that are using straight holders for Copperplate, being right-handers. And I think it's a good exercise to give it a try as well and see how you feel. Because these things are only advice, but it doesn't mean that it's black or white. So you might be feeling comfortable actually writing with a straight nib. And there are many good calligraphers using a straight nibs as well, being right-handers. So why not give it a try? All right. I thought this was helpful. As always, leave me a comment and have a great day. Thank you.